But you're outside.
I am. It's spring here in Virginia. It's gorgeous.
It's very nice. I think
Thank
you're the
you.
first guest I've had outside, bar from when I made my friends sit outside during the last lockdown.
Smart, smart. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've actually been doing Zooms from this porch the entire quarantine,
Oh
including through
wow.
the winter. And I just wear like a big fur hat and like big fur coat. And I
Yeah.
have like a cigarette flex. Like I'll just start smoking a cigarette in the middle of meetings.
I mean, that's not the worst thing you could do in the middle of a meeting, is it?
No, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just turn off camera every so often
Oh,
and
I
one
don't
there.
turn off my camera,
I
no.
mean, no. I mean, welcome to Yellow Concrete Podcast.
Yay!
Thank you for joining me. I mean, you came to me following one of my other guests.
I saw Maddie on your show, Madeline Rondeau, um, and I was like, I need to speak to this man immediately so I too can be on Yelling at Concrete.
I don't feel like that many people have that reaction to to hearing me. I need to speak to this person. We need to discuss things and see what happened. But no, it was lovely to get hit up by you. I'm terrible at introducing people, so I'm going to let you introduce yourself, of who you are and what you do. Um,
Sure. My name is Ramona Martinez. I am a visual artist, a writer, an arts organizer. I'm a Gemini, so I do lots of things, but primarily my like ideology behind art making is that I think that art, all art is inherently political and it's a tool to build a new world in place of the old world that's dying. So that sort of drives all of the art making that I do.
Makes a lot of sense. Makes sense. I did notice that you do a lot of things because I do my research. You know, shockingly, I do some research. It may not seem that way when I get into things, but you seem to do. You seem to be very. I found it interesting because you seem to do a lot of what I do in terms of handling multiple projects at once. And some artists are very singular, very stick to one, and I'm focused on one thing. Whereas you really dip into lots of little bits everywhere you go.
It's true.
Don't really stop, which is nice. It's good. Makes me feel like I'm not the only one mad enough to do that.
Yeah, I think we get told a lot in our society that, like, you have to find your thing, like, what's
Hmm.
your path, your passion. And so, in my 20s and stuff, it was like, well, I have to figure it out. I have to figure it out. But I think there's a real strength in being a polymath. Leonardo da Vinci did everything too. So,
Did. Look where that got him.
yeah. Beloved, I think he died in the arms of a prince.
Did he?
I think so.
I feel like. I feel like I need to verify. I should know more about. To be honest, I should know more about Da Vinci. I have Vitruvian Man tattooed on me, on my shoulder.
Oh my God! Yeah, you really should know more about him. That's so
But
cool.
that was like a 17-year-old Graham. I want to be an artist,
Oh.
so I'm gonna go. I'm gonna get an arty tattoo. So
And Da Vinci was your guy.
he was
You're
my
like,
guy. Yeah.
I want him on my body forever.
Well, I couldn't find someone who could do Francis Bacon's style, so I decided Da Vinci was going to be the one which I was going for.
It's so funny you mentioned Francis Bacon. I think about him all of the time because my bedroom looks like his studio. I don't know if
Oh,
you've seen
really?
pictures of
I
his
have,
studio.
yeah. I have.
Yeah. But with clothes instead of art supplies.
It's slightly more chaotic then, like,
Exactly.
because art supplies, like, there's at some point there's some formality to it, right? Even though there's chaos on there, I couldn't tell you what's on that desk right now, but there's some formality. But clothes, I feel like there's no order to clothes. There can be.
They're just in giant balls on the ground.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, yeah, Francis Bacon, I can't believe I hadn't thought of him when we were talking about your work because I can see also why you like him.
It becomes obvious. I've had that a few times of people asking me, like who inspires you? Who's your favorite artist? And then I mention it, and like, oh, it like kind of falls into place about how my style developed and how I kind of got to doing what I'm doing. But then I've only been painting this year really.
Oh, wow.
Like I used to paint as a teen, and then as I got older, I stopped because criticism happens.
Self-criticism, that's what stopped me from
Yeah.
making art after I was a teenager.
I mean, we'll track back a little bit then. I mean, you mentioned kind of coming from what your background is. Well, what is your background?
Yeah, so I painted a little bit as a 16-year-old. I used a lot of color, mostly did portraits, and I would stay up really late at night in my room painting. And and then I just kind of stopped at some point. I think maybe my senior year when I had a lot of work or when I went to college
Hmm.
and really didn't do art again for a long time just because I didn't think I had any natural talent at it, which is, kind of a lie. Because after I graduated college, I was like, you know what? I really want to learn to draw because I had read enough about art to know that you could really teach yourself. And I had
Yeah.
seen Van Gogh's trajectory of really not being able to draw proportionally correct to like being Van Gogh, right?
Hmm.
So I taught myself to draw about 5 or 6 years ago and just started like drawing people's faces over and over again in public when I was out, like in coffee shops or restaurants or whatever.
Hmm.
And then going to figure drawing classes and sort of mastering proportions. Humans have always been like my major artistic focus, like formally, I guess.
Yeah.
Something about the human face just like really, I don't know, I just really like it. So anyway, eventually that led to a wood engraving class, which led to lino cut.
Hmm.
And so now, uh, my style is pretty graphic, definitely, often with figures,
Yeah.
and I need to land the plane here. Yeah.
We're all about
So
the journey. It's fine.
yeah, exactly. So I would say I'm mostly self-taught,
Yeah.
but I had considered going to grad school at one point, but then was kind of like, I don't really feel like a conceptual artist in that sense that I would really get a lot out of that. I kind of like have an established voice now,
Yeah.
and I also don't want my art to be influenced like that. I kind of like the amateurish like quality that it has to it too. So,
I mean, I wouldn't say amateurish. Like,
oh well, thank you.
I mean, I've seen your work, and I really enjoy your work. Like as you say, you're working in lino cuts. You do get a very kind of bold graphic style with it, and it just naturally lends itself to that. And it's that it always makes me think of like medieval etchings, because that's what we were shown as kids. Because England and history go hand in hand, and it always kind of makes me think back to that. And whenever I see graphic designs which have done that kind of style, it's always a nice little. It's a very impactful way of doing it, and having read kind of your work and how you feel about printmaking and using that commodification of print within art, I found really interesting. So definitely not on the
Yeah.
amateurish style.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess what I mean by that is purely in a figurative sense. Like
Hmm.
I think there's like a spectrum between like hyper realism and like cartoon or like
Yeah.
not more but like more like, just wrong, right?
Yeah.
Um and I'm happy where I am on that spectrum. Like I don't want to get too medically correct with my figures if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Although it would certainly help me very much like with original compositions and things like that, but
Yeah. I mean, I tend to ignore composition and how people are meant to look in pictures. I don't know why. I found it. I think it was a thing a while back especially when I learned to draw. I mean, I learned to draw as a kid, like just because my dad could draw, so I
oh
dove
nice.
into it, and I was like, oh, I'm going to learn to draw, and taught myself as a child. But as I got older, and I found more and more kind of traditional art was being pushed on me, especially at an educational level, that if I wasn't doing traditional classical works and those kinds of things, my work was seen as bad. I automatically chose to reject it and was like, oh, well, lowbrow art exists, and that's none of them look like real people, and that seems to be the point. So I just dove into that. I was like,
Yeah, that's honestly the better way to go. Like I wish I had a freedom in my work. Like I definitely
hmm,
have this perfectionistic tendency where I want, even though I don't want it to look hyper real, I do want there to be a likeness to whoever I'm trying to portray
yeah.
or whatever. So it's an interesting uh game. that I play with myself in that regard. But
I mean, you've got to
anyway.
be happy with your own work, though, right? That's the game.
Oh, very
Yeah.
much. I mean, honestly, seeing my improvement from where I started,
Hmm.
like not really being able to draw people consistently well to being happy with every piece. I mean, I don't think many artists can say that. And
No,
every
definitely not.
piece I see my improvement and I'm like, this really worked. And, sometimes I fuck it up and I'm like, I ruined it. But people are like, it's great. Don't
I think that's
worry.
such a good thing, though. I don't know. I feel like that's quite rare to meet an artist who has set out to learn a methodology and then is comfortable with that and then uses that, takes that further to make original concept art. Like usually someone who learns to draw or learns to paint does it to learn the craft and then gets very
Totally.
stuck in just kind of making reproductions or doing portraits or that kind of thing. I see so much of technical greatness, but there's never anything concept wise, which so it's refreshing. I like
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out because that was a big crux for me in like my journey as an artist
that.
because I was doing reproductive stuff, which you do when you're learning, right?
Yeah.
And then at some point I'm like, what do I have to say as an artist? Like what and I couldn't really figure it out. Um and I had a neighbor tell me because I was making a lot of icons
Yeah.
always from the beginning. Um a lot of Virgin Mary icons, but just reproducing them, not really putting them into a different context or putting my
Hmm.
own spin on them or whatever. And he was like, you should really pursue religious art. I think there's something there for you. And I had another person I met randomly in Chicago who was talking about art, and he said that this very successful artist once told him religion is the way to success in the arts. Which we think about Da Vinci, right? Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's like always been this pathway for artists to reach hearts and minds and also like have some measure of success. So it just kind of, yeah, I was raised in the church, so it was like all of those icons and
Yeah.
characters, I guess, are very familiar to me. And so it's if it's a language that I already speak, I can
Yeah.
riff on the language in a way that is natural to me. I guess if that makes sense.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's interesting that you've gone that way in a sense with it, because obviously, I think a lot of artists who are raised within religion will take it, but they'll do an absolute rejection of it. They want nothing to do with it. So if they're going to do it, they're going to mess it up. They're going to accent it in some way. They're going to take the imagery and just completely distort it to make it their own thing. But they want it to be a rebellion against religion. Whereas your work, you take very specifically the icons, but you retain them as the icons. If that makes sense.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly. It's like what I was saying before about religious art essentially trying to reach hearts and minds.
Hmm.
What I said at the beginning of the podcast about how my work ultimately is to help envision the building of a new world. What I want to do is take these familiar images that have a lot of power and recontextualize them in a way that makes people able to reclaim the icons as their own,
Yeah.
ultimately. So just to give an example for the viewers, listeners, I have a Virgin Mary icon, but she's Our Lady of Anti-Fascism. So she has her face covered. It's black, red, and white. There are roses, the iron, a front symbol through her halo, or Saint Michael, the traditional icon of him piercing the devil with a sword, but Saint Michael is black and the devil is a cop, and Saint Michael is the traditional patron saint of police officers. So it's sort
Hmm.
of taking that traditional use, but twisting it in a good way, I think.
Yeah.
So
No, definitely. It's to me, it's fascinating. So religious work always fascinates me. Anything which involves religious work just absolutely fascinates me because I know I make a conscious effort to avoid anything religious in my work. And I mean, I was raised Church of England, so I'm baptized and everything like that. But my parents were never heavily religious. My grandparents kind of religious, but it's kind of half Catholic and then half into Church of England, and it kind of deviates. But my dad's never been pushed religion on me. My mum never has. But they were fully accepting of us kind of rejecting it. But I've always taken it as like, I know the dogma and I know everything which goes with that, so I can push back on it. But I really avoid doing that because I don't know. I feel like there's so much to go alongside it and so much concept which naturally comes with any iconography to do with it that I can't control it in a way. So when I put it into art, I'm like, there's a risk here that I'm saying something I don't want to be saying.
Yeah, it's honestly my most successful icons, like the two that I just listed, those were like not me thinking about it and figuring it out. It was like into my brain from heaven. Like it was like I saw the whole thing done and I was like, okay. So it's not like really my idea. And so I didn't have to think it through or worry about it being taken the wrong way because I think those are very clear. Like I don't think they can be misconstrued. But again, that was like just I was blessed. I got like a divine transmission with those. So
I think it's interesting as well. You kind of pointing out that, like, yeah, I mean, Da Vinci and the classical artists were all, usually funded by the church in one way or another, or pushed through the church. But then with that kind of comment of religion is the way, to make success in art. It is one of those weird kind of juxtapositions in a modern era now that you can either go one way or another. Either if you use religious iconography and you use it in a positive way, you'll get huge appreciation from religious communities because they see it as the progression of their faith. But then if you push against it, it will also get you a lot of notoriety because people will look at it and go, oh, well, I don't like this. I'm going to give it a lot of attention because I don't like this.
yeah, and I also have like a fair amount of people who follow my work who are Catholics or like, Catholics who don't really go to Catholic church anymore or believe in it, who are like, your work is so important to me and I love it so much because I lost faith in this like tradition basically, and you're reclaiming it for me and for a vision of the world that I believe in. And there's a lot of people, not just within art, but within mysticism. Like there's this whole like movement to reclaim Christianity for more like anarchic, radical means. Like it is ultimately a radical religion, or at its root. But I mean, of course, absolute power corrupts absolutely. We don't have to go into the history.
Like with anything, if it lasts long enough, eventually it'll corrupt. Like that's just the way things go.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, I found that very, very interesting. I'm kind of curious now, though. Like you mentioned way back when we were discussing kind of going to college. What did you do at college then? If you abandoned art?
I studied English literature.
Okay.
I was a journalist for 10 years before I started. Well, no, I was drawing that whole time.
Okay.
No, wait. No, hold on. I've like lost track.
Lost track of you.
Okay, so I started drawing around when I started working as a journalist. That was like 2012. Drawing till like, I started doing lino cut about 3 years ago. So that's 2018, 2017 when I started doing relief printing.
Nice.
But I was working as a journalist full time up until about 3 years ago. So doing podcasts. Yeah.
Okay.
And working in the news for a little bit. And
I mean, that's I think that I can see that in your work. Like as a stylistic thing, I can see it in your work, but I can see it in kind of your messages as well. Because, like you're saying, you're taking pre-existing images and you're taking images which to me are media. They're journalistic images.
Totally.
And then you're blending that through religious iconography as well, and through the messages you're kind of putting out. But then at the same time, you're doing lino cut, which is a printing press process, which is all related to newspaper and everything, which kind of drifts into that. So it's I almost feel like, is it intentional, or did you just end up there and you've kind of done it subconsciously?
That's a really good question. I think it must be like a inherent need to want to affect public discourse,
Hmm.
I guess, right? Um, in a way that's impactful.
Yeah.
And, podcasting is definitely impactful, but there's something about doing it in one image that's like very romantic and has a sort of like leftist quality and tradition to it that the press does too,
Hmm.
but not so much these days. I think it's more easy to be radical as an artist than it is as a journalist in today's world, just because of how journalism functions as like a for-profit,
Yeah.
industry. So,
Yeah, I think it's that balance, isn't it, between if you're working as a journalist, working as a individualistic body is much harder to do, whereas as an artist, you don't really have to answer to anybody. You can just create your work and throw it out there. Whereas as journalism, it's always going to have an editor. It's always going to have those structures. Otherwise, it's just a blog, which
right. Or yeah, you could be like a freelance journalist for newspapers that will publish more leftist content or sites that will, and there are
yeah,
some and whatever. I mean, and the thing is, like, what's considered leftist isn't often always like radical. It's just like not capitalist. So people
yeah.
are like, oh, it's political, whatever.
Oh,
So,
I mean, if you're in the UK, leftist doesn't even have to be. It can be considered capitalism. You like
ugh.
full on because our left is represented by essentially a centrist. So we're yeah, it's so blended. It's
Yeah,
strange to see what people consider radical or extreme these days.
totally.
Yeah,
Um, yeah. I feel like I was gonna say something else, but I lost my train of thought
it'll
about.
come back to you. Trains come more than
Um,
once a day. That's
Oh, I remember. I think it was about Mala Leche,
okay.
which is a zine that I helped publish, sort of continuing that journalism thread, right, of wanting to get concepts
Hmm.
that I support, whatever, out to as many people as possible, but still through a primarily print method. Um,
Yeah.
our zine is actually like a photocopied Xeroxed thing, even though it's also on the web. But it's important to us to have something like that free and available to the public for people who don't even have like an internet connection necessarily.
Hmm.
And I'm planning on doing some more wheat pasting too. So like the idea of like trying to get my work out to the public without a lot of intermediaries like the internet necessarily.
What is wheat pasting?
Oh, well, wheat pasting is, well, like when people make a illustration and they
Yeah.
like paste it to the side of a building with the paste and it's made out of flour and water.
Oh,
So that's called wheat pasting.
wheat pasting. That makes so
Mhm.
much sense. But I've never heard that term before.
Mhm, mhm, mhm. You see it in like old Fellini movies or
Yeah. Well, I just call it fly posting
oh, I never heard that term before. That must be
because
like a American.
yeah, because it's you usually used it for like band flyers and stuff like that, and
Okay, yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
like posters and all those kinds of things. But I mean, Malachi intrigued me as well when I was looking through your back catalogue
Thank you.
because that's what I do. Look
We're
people
very
up.
proud of it. Yeah. It's just so people know, it's a zine that publishes work from women identifying genderqueer and non-binary artists and writers in Central Virginia. And it's pretty fucking excellent. We have some really talented folks who live here, so
You do, as I keep finding out whenever I interview them and
thanks.
get
Yeah,
into.
there's actually a energetic hotspot here that kind of is like a hellmouth, like if you've seen in Buffy. I'm not kidding.
Just somewhere in the middle of Virginia.
It's true. There are ley lines on the earth that have more energetic power. One of them is in like Sedona, Arizona. There's like some holy sites around the world, and Charlottesville is
Right
at
in the
one of
middle.
the points. And we attract everything from like cool artists to Nazis, and it all converges here.
I mean, if you're gonna have one, you're gonna have the other. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, opposites attract and all that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, no, I mean, yeah, I was kind of reading through Imalache work and kind of the whole idea of it, and I liked the idea of it being this kind of it's essentially the way I describe it is the same as the way I describe my zine, which is Null Point, is that it's creation of disposable content. It's disposable art, but it's embracing that idea of something being mass produced, repeated, and pushed out. Which I've spoken to a lot of people about zines, and I often feel like it's drifted away from that as a medium, like idea. It
That's
kind of
interesting.
blends, and people kind of, yeah, I mean, obviously zines can be an art form in themselves, and you can have really bespoke zines and stuff like that. So it was interesting to just kind of find another one which was like, no, we produce this. Like,
It's funny you should say that though, because our last issue is so nicely printed that people are like, you should be charging for this. This is like, but
yeah,
even if you could throw it away, right? The idea is that we want the zine to be so good you carry the images and stories in your head even after the zine is gone. So,
definitely, definitely. I have a habit because so mine I produce as cheaply as possible. That's always my thing of producing as cheap as possible. I give it away for free as zine fairs, and I have run into exactly the same thing where people have said, "How are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Surely can I give you something for it?" I'm like, no, that kind of defeats the concept idea of it. But
right.
I leave it in places and just abandon copies everywhere because I like the idea of people stumbling across things. Yeah,
Totally. We have it at like 5 locations around town for people to grab. And I think there's something in mala leche for everybody. It's like there's no, it's themed, but there's so much room for all of these different expressions of the theme or the vision for the zine that, yeah, it's
makes a
pretty
lot of sense.
special.
I do have a question. I
Yes.
have so the Feminist Union of Charlottesville Creatives, is that pronounced fuke or fuck?
It's pronounced fuck.
Okay.
People people do say fook if they feel embarrassed, and that's fine. But
Yeah,
it's technically fuck.
it's technically fuck. No, it makes sense because I was reading it, I was just like, I just don't know which way I would pronounce it if I came across it.
Yeah.
But otherwise, yeah.
We like people to have that moment of uncertainty. That's
Yeah,
part of the shtick.
the shtick. I mean, I feel as artists, you part of the job as an artist is to give people that uncertainty.
Exactly. That's like the whole idea with messing with icons, right? Because for a
Yeah.
moment you go, "Ooh, is this okay?" Even me,
Do you have that? Have you made things which you've thought back? Maybe I wouldn't. Can't do that
I
one.
don't think so. No.
No, nothing you won't mess with.
No. I definitely think about the Virgin Mary a lot in terms of trying to make her more sexual.
Hmm.
And I've taken that conceptually in my head to a very far extreme. But I don't know. Like I said, I kind of prefer to get the ideas from up there rather than trying to figure them out. So that's worked for me so far.
Acting as a vessel, as it were.
Well, art is very much channeling. At least it is for me. So,
Yeah. I mean, we're very similar, but very different at the same time in terms of how I produce work. I mean, I'm non-religious in every capacity, but at the same time, I completely appreciate the work you do.
thank
Yeah,
you.
I appreciate as you ride through it. I mean, you mentioned using Mary there as a prime example of what you produce. I also like the fact that that most of your site just refers to her as Mary, like it's just a buddy. Like, I know Mary, right? I know Mary.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like a new level of comfort with religion, which I've never really seen.
Yeah, that I had not thought of that honestly. I guess people do call her Virgin Mary or the Virgin Mary. I sometimes, when I talk to her, pray the rosary, I call her Holy Mother or Mother, which is another intimate
Hmm.
mother. Um, yeah, she's cool. She has played a big role in my life through art, coming through art first, like, and making her image so many times. She was sort of like knocking on my conscious
Hmm.
door, like, hey, I have something to give you other than just ideas for art. And I think she's really taught me to nurture myself, uh, to realize that mothering or nurturing can be done in a healthy way that is fulfilling, and also this, like, she has this inherent strength too, and bravery and courageousness and consistency, this like consistent love that's very nurturing and healing. And I grew up, I don't know if it was this way for you in the Church of England, but there was so much focus on God the Father, God the Father. And I think Protestants really did a disservice not paying attention to Mary, because she in some ways is easier to talk to, I find, than this concept of this masculine God who's I found to be not that responsive. So
Yeah, I think Church of England, you don't necessarily get God as like a higher being situation. You get a lot of Jesus. There's a lot of Jesus. It's like I think within Catholicism in the UK, it's a lot of God, but in Protestantism, it's very much no. Jesus is your guy. He's your buddy. We want to learn the ways of him and do all this. But Mary does kind of fall to the sidelines, like absolutely falls to the sidelines. But at the same time, like the disciples get a lot of attention within.
yeah, and you know what? They were kind of jokers, in my opinion. Like when okay, so like when Jesus gets like arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane, they all run away.
Yeah.
And they hide after he's crucified, and the women are the ones who are tending to his body, and they walk with him with the cross. Like disciples are fucking chicken shits. Like
I always find the disciples kind of interesting in the sense of just looking at them as being very human. Of if something goes wrong, we run. You say, yeah, but it's the Son of God. Doesn't matter. We run. We can only carry this so far, and then we're gone. Like, yeah.
that is so much more generous than my response to them.
I mean, I can't talk. I abandoned it after a very short period of time. So,
Yeah. I mean, I also it's funny, like I studied a little bit of Bible history just in the last few years, and there's some versions of the gospel where Jesus is just outright like, you fucking idiot, like without saying it. It's like, you guys aren't ever gonna learn anything. Fuck you. Yeah.
it's a realization halfway through. Like, are my friends all idiots?
Yeah. And meanwhile, Mary Magdalene and him were probably like tete-a-teting,
Yeah.
just vibing off of
Yeah.
each other's deep secret knowledge, and the other disciples are like,
To be honest, I think that's the point. I think Mary Magdalene gets a lot more attention than Virgin
so
Mary.
true. That's so true.
And I don't know if that's necessarily just because that whole idea of thinking of kind of the Virgin Mary as like a peaceful, sacred icon,
Right.
and people are very comfortable with that. People are comfortable with a woman knowing her place in terms of a religion, whereas Mary Magdalene was obviously seen as having this background and everything like that. So they go, oh well, we can take shots at this. We
Yeah,
can't do that with
totally.
Virgin Mary.
Well, there's two things I think of with that. One is that I think Mary Magdalene was so maligned. If this is true, my hunch and why I think people like her is because the idea was that she was, Jesus's confidant and had a much bigger role in his life than, whether or not that was like involved sex or whatever. And also, nowhere in the Gospels does it say she was a prostitute, but that's like evidence, right, that she was maybe more important than we have
Yeah.
been told. And the second thing is that the Virgin Mary, I think what's really interesting about her, and I've started to work on a Virgin Mary oracle deck also to make this point through work, but that she's actually a very radical figure. Like she has this prayer in the Bible in Luke called the Magnificat, and it is arguably the most radical prayer in the entire Bible. She's like, basically like, God has scattered the proud in the conceit of their hearts. He has struck down the mighty from their thrones and lifted up the lowly. He has sent the rich away empty and fed the hungry with good things. And like, it's about this God who restores justice. And also she birthed God, right? So like theoretically she's even more powerful, right, in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think Mary is. It's interesting that you should say people are more comfortable with her, and I think they are because they don't understand her
Yeah.
in the way that she really is.
Yeah, I think that it's that whole idea of she becomes a very pious, otherworldly figure, spiritual. So people kind of say, oh well, okay, yeah, she's pure in there, but that's fine. We can focus on these other aspects,
Totes.
um, rather than doing what you do, which is reclaiming her in a way.
She's
Reclaiming
amazing.
her
I
back.
mean, if you think about her, like, 14 or 15 years old in her room one day, if this happened, for the sake of the story,
Hmm.
a goddamn angel shows up and is like, hi, first of all, hi. Second of all, you're going to have a baby because of God. And he doesn't tell her really. I mean, he's like, this is a path, but
Hmm.
she accepts. She like has the composure to not just go like, up, 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 up. Like she's like, so, she's like, here I am, like the handmaiden of the Lord. Like, I'm ready. It's
I'm curious.
so inspirational.
I'm curious now. I got kind of a couple of questions for you in terms of just running off the thought. First question is how you feel about the depiction of angels. All right, because every time I read about angels, they sound like the most crazy, like
The
otherworldly
spinning wheel of
being. Yeah,
eyes.
and yet every time you see them, they're just people with wings, and I'm like, I feel there's a missed opportunity within art to go. We could have had these amazing creatures,
It's true.
and we went, no, we're just gonna do
So I think that I have had an angel appear to me in a dream
this. Okay.
before. That's possibly another story for a different day, but I think angels appear to us in a form that is less scary.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, for whatever reason, Ezekiel, when he saw that crazy ass spinning wheel of eyes situation, I think, like, maybe he was ready to see that in a way, or
Mm-hmm.
it was like a different kind of level of experience. But, like, if an angel shows itself to a human, I think they do it in a way that we can process. Like, maybe our brain can't even process anything beyond seeing something
Yeah.
familiar. And plus, I mean, angels are hot. Like I would say, like, go for it. Like a sexy angel.
I do
Who can
enjoy.
complain?
There's there's a statue, and I don't know who made it. I think it's of Satan, and a church banned it because it was too sexy. And then the brother of the sculptor made a second statue, which was even sexier. And I don't know. I feel like I saw that online somewhere, but I feel like that was
You
a
have
real
to
thing.
send that to me.
I will find that. I will find you, sexy Satan. We will say.
That's so funny.
It's one of those.
Wait,
Yeah.
why is someone? Oh, it was like a Satan was like in a statue with
Well,
somebody else, I
he's
presume.
like posed in a classic pose, but he was also extremely ripped
Oh,
and like tenuous. It was very much like you look at him and you went, yeah, I'd get a little bit of that. Like I'd give a little bit of my soul. So just
be
to
hard to say no to that. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like there's a whole thing of it when people, especially when people depict hell and say and all those kinds of things. And obviously, in the past, it was always very demon, very goat, very horns and that kind of thing. And it's like, well, no, well, you kind of got to think if it's like an all-powerful being, they can probably just look as hot as you want them to look.
That's part of their charm, I would
Yeah,
imagine.
just turn up and chant people. But my second question then is kind of obviously you do approach religious iconography from the radical viewpoint of what it is at its core rather than what it is within its dogma. Do you ever kind of find that you get resistance from artists who are anti-religion? And
That's a good question. Yes. No, no. I mean, not me personally,
okay,
but I do encounter leftists in general who are suspicious of religious leftists, if that makes sense. I
yeah,
mean,
that makes sense.
and for good reason. A lot of people have their own trauma associated with
Hmm.
church. Church is a very coercive place, violent, not safe for many people. Um, but I would say that my leftism is based in my theology ultimately.
Yeah,
And so I think that's, and like if you think about like American history, like the church has been on the front lines of social change here in many instances, during the civil rights movement most recently.
Mm.
And when the Nazis came to Charlottesville, clergy were using their bodies to protect protesters. So I think that there is room for that, but there is a lot of antagonism within leftism towards Christianity, which I understand. But me personally, as an artist, I haven't really heard that. Most people are kind of like, okay, okay, I see what you're doing here.
Yeah. But I
So,
find it interesting that when I do encounter people who are extremely left and have a problem with people who have faith, because it's usually along those lines as well, there'll be that other side to them which is very about spiritualism. So whether it's kind of
mhm.
Wiccan or any other, faith within that realm, which in my mind, I classify it all together because it's all faith. Um, they're very against just Christianity, and like you say, yeah, there is very good reason for them to have hostility because of what they're presented with and what you interpret as. I mean, I'm completely the same in the sense of my experiences with Christianity
Yeah.
form a negative opinion, so there's no way around that. But I always find it very strange of meeting people who are very left who are like, yeah, but there's things we don't accept, things which we will never trust, rather than just go, well, no, people are people, and they have their ways and means about it.
Yeah, I think too there is maybe something religion can teach us about. I mean, I think like a lot of leftists are very like materialist, right? There's
Mm,
this disbelief in anything that can't be explained by objective reality. And I think that's a trap that keeps a lot of people from really appreciating how much the divine plays an active role in our everyday lives, you know. Um, there's a lot of things that happen that we can't explain. And I think like if you are a materialist, one should consider that our brains and our eyes and stuff are only available to process a limited amount of information. Like we don't really know the truth. It's just what we know to the best of our ability. So I think you have to be open
yeah,
to the idea that there are levels of existence that if you just have a purely objective materialist worldview, you're going to miss out on.
definitely. I think there's in a way is that to me is always kind of the humanity of us, is that we, even when you do get someone who is not open and someone who is completely materialist, it's people looking to define things because we as a species have a discomfort with things undefined, and a discomfort with just going, actually, no, I don't know the answer. You know, I don't know anything, and I'm not. No, I'm just. I can leave it alone. Like, whereas I kind of dive in and go, well, actually, no, I like the abstract. I like just not knowing anything. I can float in the black all I want.
Yeah,
No way
totally.
away from it. Um, I just kind of looking back through your kind of your lineup cuts and your prints and everything. Kind of that. It's interesting that we mentioned the whole graphic aspect of it. Of you mentioned on kind of your sites that you look a lot to German expressionists and how they reacted. And I found that interesting in sense of obviously the history of Germany and how German expressionism got going was this rebuttal of against things, especially painting, because it was like, no, we're going to do painting how we want to do things. So I found that.
Yeah. I love Katy Colwitz. I mean, her work is just so, it's so anti-establishment, but in a way that is very personal.
Hmm.
You know, she had sons that were killed in World War I. She was very anti-war fervently her whole life. She was an advocate for the working class her whole life, and it was just very genuine. And she was a housewife and a mother and a prolific printmaker.
Hmm.
And also, her style is so I like iconic. Icons. Um, and I love how contrasty and dark her style is, and full of so much emotion. And our styles are very different, but I definitely like how I like her thick, chunky. She's very expressive
Yeah.
way of carving, and I also like Egon Schiele, who's not German, but is in this same time frame.
Yeah.
This his
Kind of.
figurative work.
I find it interesting as well. I mean, your work, I'd say, is quite elegant in terms of the
Okay.
images you produce. And I mean, that may entirely be subject matter because you know, Mary won them. Because I always think, whenever I think German expression, I think of Otto Dix and
Oh, right, totally.
all the work which was kind of post-war and everything like that. So to see it utilized in a sense to try and make something more ornate is it's nice.
Yeah, that's true. The subject matters are it is a more elegant, refined subject
Mm,
matter, but with that raw energy of the expressionist. But I
yeah.
also want to, much like Colwitz, like make work that has a message inherent in it. I mean, I think Colwitz was much more subtle, which
Hmm.
is also why her work is so strong, you
Yeah.
know. Um, an image that involves a grieving mother in that raw energy says so much about the horrors of war in a way that I don't know that I would be capable of at this point for me as an artist because she's capturing the emotion
Hmm.
whereas I'm more about like the composition and it's more like poster-esque for me. More media-esque and I'd say
Yeah.
Colwitz is in a much more personal realm.
Yeah. I think with Golish, you're running along that line of story with an image, whereas approaching it from more of kind of like a graphic point of view, you essentially you remove the story because if you don't know what that imagery is, to you it's just there. It's just it's hearts and robes and whatever it needs to be within that situation. So you kind of make up your own story, I guess. In a way.
Yeah, or it's a story that's told through signifiers rather
Mm.
than emotion, perhaps, or about power dynamics, inverting the power dynamics of a traditional image
Yeah.
to get the message across. Yeah, I'm trying to think about if any of my work has been like emotional in that like pathos sense, like Colwitz,
Yeah.
and I don't think so. It's more like tongue in cheek, I would say. It has like a sort of irreverence to it that I don't think Colwitz
I'm curious
was
then.
taught
Do
to.
you, when you create art, do you get a catharsis from it?
The act of carving itself is very cathartic. There's a
Yeah.
physicality about lino cut that I like very much. It's addictive.
It's repetitive
Um,
strain injury just waiting to happen.
I try not to do it too often. There are some people who carve every day. I'm like, no way,
You
no
just have
way.
wrists of steel. Like,
And your neck, I mean, just no.
yeah.
Do I get catharsis? I get catharsis when I finish a print.
Okay.
The whole process is cathartic in the sense that it feeds me energetically, right?
Mm.
Like anything you do that makes the time go by so fast, that's really good. But then when it's done and I'm happy with it and I have it on my fridge, I'll just like stare at it for like, 5 minutes at a time here and there and be like, good job. You did good, kid.
All I can think of is the complete contrast to when I finish something. I look at it and go, "The fuck did we do?" And then it'll take me a month or so to get really comfortable with it, and then I'll be like, "Okay,
Uh-huh.
maybe I'll share it now. Maybe we'll show it off a little bit." Um,
I like immediately scan it as soon as it's dry and put it on
oh
there.
wow,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I don't know if I'd be comfortable with being that comfortable with myself. Like, that's a question for a therapist. That's not a question for
Yeah, I'd be
this.
interested in your astrological birth chart.
I mean, I think that's why I kind of asked this because to me, when I create art, I see the whole process as the cathartic part. That
Mhm.
I'm embodying an emotion, I'm embodying an idea, and then I drag in imagery from pop culture and my life and anything which I can visually represent because I know other people will be able to recognize those images, and then I add abstraction within that. So they have that initial reference and go, oh well, I recognize this picture of a dog, but after that, what's on top of that kind of goes it through. So to me, I'm blending what my formative brain can do with my artistic brain.
Hmm.
So to have a process or to have art which is to you that the actual the work is the cathartic part, as much as it is, but you're also trying to remove that is fascinating.
Remove what?
I mean, just that make it kind of colder in a sense of you having you're putting work out there into a solid image and saying, yeah, this is done, this is dusted. Whereas I don't know, I feel like maybe there's like a
Oh,
lack of
yeah.
organic connection between you and the work. I don't mean that in an insulting way.
Lack of organic connection. Well, there is like a less. I have always, even when I painted, I was like this.
Hmm.
I would work feverishly on something, and it would be done, and that was it. I'm like, I'm finished now with this.
Okay.
Boom, it's out into the world. Um, and I would definitely say my work, even the divine downloads, are more kind of like intellectual pieces than emotional pieces. Like I'm not a Colwitz, I'm not a Rothko. There
Hmm.
isn't so much of a I'm trying to express something about myself. That's true, but it's more like about myself as a Christian in the in my place in the world. Like
Hmm.
it's more within a paradigm of political conversation more so than, a German expressionist that's very much about the personal pathos of
Yeah.
participating in that, I guess.
That's interesting. So essentially, I mean, you've kind of taken what you initially started with when you're kind of doing your journalism and all those kinds of things, and you've kept the ideology, but you changed medium.
I've kept the ideology, but without the hangups about objective truth,
Right.
maybe. But then at the same time, I would say that I think the root of Christianity, when done right, does have truths, right? Whether or not they're objective in the materialist sense, like could be proven by evidence, but that I still believe very deeply,
Yeah.
So,
That's
yeah.
interesting. Do you ever make completely personal work then? Like work you don't show people?
Oh.
I'm curious
um,
why that was the reaction, but yeah, sure.
I kind of beat myself up about not being more in a flow state. And I
Okay.
really admire that about your work and Maddie's work and other people's work. You're not wrong in talking about a sort of emotional disconnect
Hmm.
because I don't just sit down and let myself express myself artistically in that way. And I think it's because of the perfectionist thing,
Okay.
you know. And if I'm and it shouldn't matter because I'm the only one seeing it. But that's how hard I am on myself that I'm like,
Right.
but I think once we open back up to the world after COVID, the one place that I did let myself do that was sketching people in a sketchbook in public. Because if you mess it up, it's not a big deal. It's just like that's part of the process of sketching people
Hmm.
plein air. Like you might not always get it right, especially if you're using pen or whatever. So I got to go back to doing that and tapping into that part of myself because that's really healthy.
Yeah, I mean I think that's why it intrigues me so much because I think I said on a recent solo podcast is I used art for the longest time as the coping mechanism to
Hmm.
deal with anything personal, and it didn't matter whether I show it to anyone. I was embracing it fully from the context of this is going to help me. It's about what I'm
That's
doing with
so
me.
good. It's so good.
And then I essentially had to learn the other side of it. I had to learn the media side of it and the production side of it and go, okay, well, I can produce this into a product and I can put this out there into the world and the print side, and I still hate graphic design and always will. Um, but it was just like one of those things of, yeah, I completely struggled with that half. So you've come from completely the other angle.
It's totally true. And like I I think part of it too is because I know that I have a way of making striking images. I will like
Mm,
lend it out to people, like I'll it'll always be in service of something. And so
yeah.
there isn't a lot of time. I have not made the time in my life for that personal art journaling process.
Hmm.
But I really ought to. I really ought to.
Definitely. That's
Yeah.
I think it's one of those key things with art. You have to learn both sides, and I don't think that's taught to people enough. You do get very much stuck in that rut of some people get told, you make art, cool, that's fine, but you got to make a product. You got to make something you can sell.
Yeah.
You've got to make industry from it. Or you get the flip side of that is you get very radical, rebellious people who are saying no, you can't sell anything, and
Hmm.
only street art and public art is the real art because everything else is watered down. And really, you need to find that that middle ground.
Totally. And I feel more free to do it with music. Like I
Mm-hmm.
write songs once every 3 years. often
Just
divine
casually slip that in there. Just like, oh, I do all this stuff, but oh yeah, but I do music as well.
Yeah, I can
I'm,
do that with songs, but art, I'm still too anal about it. I don't know.
is it maybe just that difference between imagery and words? Words
No,
are
it's
easier to perfect.
melody. I'm a melody girl, but sometimes the words flow if I let them.
Interesting. I did
Yeah.
see a video on your Instagram of you playing what I assumed was
I
a
love
ukulele.
country. I love, yeah, oh yeah. I did a cover of NSYNC, but I love writing country songs. In an alternate life, I would have been a Nashville country songwriter.
You're in Virginia, so
Yeah,
that's country all through and through, right?
it's true. It
As far as
is.
I know. Again, my
Some I think people in Tennessee might disagree, but it is the South. It is.
it's not northern. It's the way I think of it.
No.
I mean, I'm from Middle England, so we get told we're not southern and we're not northern. So nobody wants to accept us either way, but they also don't want to admit that we exist because we're in the middle. So I can appreciate, yeah, not being
And
southern enough.
and these kinds of like regional rivalries must go back like literally centuries, right? So
Yeah. Yeah, we never let anything die in the UK. Hold a grudge for the rest of our eternity, as it were. I mean, in terms of kind of your outlook, then you mentioned Virginia and Charlottesville being kind of a little bit of a hub at the moment for new artists and extra going on. What have you got working on at the moment? Then?
I'm working on a wheat paste, as I said,
Mm-hmm.
which is very exciting. That will hopefully, I probably will not document it because it's not technically legal.
Yeah.
I will document it and I'll post it on my website in like a year.
I find if you're going to do something which is, and this is advice for any artist listening, is do not record yourself doing the act. You can record the act, like the finished product. Just don't record yourself doing the act and don't have anyone around to witness you doing the act, because then if someone comes to you, you can deny it. And that's the simplest message I can give
Yeah. So I'm working on a big 6 foot piece,
you.
which will hopefully go up tomorrow, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Wait, is that a 6 foot lino cut?
it's a lino cut that I put on an overhead transparency, and I'm now tracing on paper with Sharpie.
Okay. Because I
And then
couldn't
that
think
will
how
be
you would print a
wheat
6 foot
pasted.
lino cut.
You could print. Oh no, I have no fucking idea how to do that.
That's so, like that's, yeah, no, sorry.
It's massive.
Yeah,
Someday, perhaps,
maybe.
I will make a big 6 foot lino cut. But and then I'm also working on a Virgin Mary Oracle deck, which will be 44 cards of all lino cuts. Oracle decks are fortune telling devices, divination devices, I should say, much like tarot cards, except it doesn't have the traditional tarot structure. It
Hmm.
will be 44 different incarnations of Mary. Um, and the goal is to introduce people to her more radical and um, parts of her that the church might want to look over, or um, there's a bunch of different apparitions of Mary that have happened all over the world. Just all that sorts of stuff. But hopefully that will come out like next year. It's gonna be. I've made six. I'm making the sixth card,
I was
so
going to say that's a long process, 44
it will
cards.
be long.
Yeah. I like projects which take a while, though.
Me too.
I think that's one of those things of, like we're seeing you doing multiple projects, is I like running multiple projects because it means I can work on one, and then when one of them dies down a little bit, I can work on another, and then just gradually riff my way
Yeah,
across
and it's
everything.
good to not be lino cutting all the time, as I mentioned. So
Yes. For your health and
for your
sanity
health.
and everything else
Hmm.
involved in that.
I'm trying to do one a week, but so far I haven't been that disciplined. So we'll see how it
I
goes.
mean, that's still a lot. That's still
It is.
a year at least, almost,
Hmm.
of your entire life.
Hmm.
Lino cut.
It'll be good. That was like last year for me in quarantine. I think you and Maddie talked about this a little bit about how productive artists have or haven't
Mm,
been. And I fell into the camp of I made like 30 lino cuts last year, some crazy amount. I
yeah.
just I don't
Isn't
know what happened, but
Something took you, and you're just like, no, I'm making a line of cuts now. I'm doing this. I mean, I can appreciate that. I mean, I've been doing my daily streams again because of second lockdown,
Yeah.
and yeah, that's 160 days of at this point of just turning up every day.
That's really admirable. I mean, anytime you're committed to something to do it daily for that long, that's not easy to do.
See, people say it's commitment. I kind of feel like it's more like attendance because it's already in my house. I'm going to be here anyway. All I really commit to is just turning on the camera. And that's, yeah.
All right, well, fair.
I'll downplay it. That's I don't like the idea of ego and Graham. It doesn't go anywhere. Either side. But no, I think, this brings us around to a couple of lovely points. I definitely think, exploring that other side of personal artwork is something which everyone should get into.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say I'll show you what I do, but that's not the point. So,
I mean, technically I have a zine where you can anonymously submit it. And then you can you avoid all fear of it being wrong or anything like that.
that might be good for me, because I was just going to say, but other people will see it, Graham. I don't want to do that.
No, this essentially, I mean, people. No, I was going to say people like you, but you're an artist. People who don't create art was the reason I started making the zine, to encourage them to make art, because so many people had said, oh, well, I can't draw or I can't write, and then, they clearly can. I just said, well, no, if we remove all names and we remove all ownership of it, and then I just publish it out into the world for free, you get to create, you get the catharsis of seeing out there.
You know what? This brings to mind, there's this comic book artist. Oh, she won the MacArthur Genius Grant. Linda Bear? No, it's not Linda Berry. Maybe it's Linda Berry. Anyway, she has this comic book skill building exercise where she has you draw 4 panels of things that happened in your day, and you're only allowed to take 5 minutes per panel. And so the drawings that you do are like crazy, right? Because you're trying to like draw yourself, all the shit in the background. But the result is so fucking hilarious. Like, when I was doing this for a couple of weeks, I made myself laugh so hard with these drawings. And I was like, I posted one on my Instagram, and no joke, someone said, this is the best drawing you've ever done. And I'm now realizing from this conversation that might be a really good way to get into this, because it's like, if you time yourself, you literally can't fret over anything. You just have to be like...
Well, I think that's the thing. I think I always say that there's... The reason why I put it was you need to find a hostile audience once in a while. It's so easy to get trapped in that idea of producing the same idea, producing the same work, produce work which gets you positive feedback, because that's the way to do it. So every so often you need to throw it to someone who hates it, who is going to hate it, so it kind of comes back. So that whole idea of pushing a restriction on yourself or limiting yourself in a way, that drives that. Completely drives it. I think there's a Matthew Barney sculpture where he attacks like a bungee cord to himself, and then the paper's on a wall like 6 foot higher, and he has to get to the paper to draw. So he gets like one line in at a time, and then gets dragged back. And to me, it's like, that's art. We put restrictions in place, so then we can break them. Essentially.
That's so funny.
These are positive messages for artists, I feel. Definitely. But they should definitely check out your work as well.
Thank you. Yes, they could do that at ramonamartinez.net. You could do that on Instagram at by_Ramona_Martinez. Ramona with an A, Martinez with a Z.
Links will be in the description.
Links will be in the descriptions.
I like the fact that you had to think about that. Yeah. A few moments ago, you completely recited what Mary had said in one of her writings without even hesitation.
I literally looked at my vaccine card the other day after the nurse told me what my birthday was, or asked me, what is your birthday? And I was like, and I was like, why did I look at my card? That's so weird.
I gotta double check these things once in a while. Like, yeah, that works. But thank you for coming on the show. I think we can round this now.
Having me. Yes, it was such a pleasure, and I love talking about art with you. You gave me a lot of food for thought, like for my own process, and I can't thank you enough for that. It was like a good studio visit with an. I mean, talking to other artists is just medicine. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. I do have a bad habit of just giving people too many ideas. It's
That's
one
good
thing
though.
of meeting artists and then they're like, oh yeah, I'm doing this. I'm like, well, here's 20 other things you could also think about.
That's good. Maybe you should be like, I mean, you are a curator, right? You curate a zine and you
Curiosity.
host a podcast, so you
Yeah,
get to do that all the time.
I
Right?
find people to talk to I think are going to be interesting and inspiring. Or sometimes they come find me. In your case.
Yay!
You snuck your way in. I say thank you for coming along, and in which case we will sign off and talk to these guys later.
Bye, guys and girls and non-gender conforming individuals.
Which is the long way of saying guys.